Thanks for coming by. I appreciate you carving out time. I know you have lunch, you have a session. This is the easy one to miss. So thanks for stopping by. We'd love to talk with you and learn how we can better support you and share some of the opportunities that are available in our region. When I get started, because I'm sort of recognizing you spend a lot of time like sitting in sessions, so I want to get started with a little bit of an activity. I'm just going to ask you, all you have to do is raise your hand at the beginning. And then we're going to get a little bigger from there. But I'd love for you to just raise your hand if you identify as creative. Are you a creative person? Yes. The rooms with teachers, this gets better and better. It's always better in a room with teachers. It's a little more than half for those of you that didn't turn around or those online that we can't see. I'll make it a little easier for those of you that couldn't raise your hand there. How many of you were ever children? You were a child. Great, 100% participation. So as we get to talking about some of the things that are coming out of the Southeast Tennessee STEM Hub and ways that we'd like to partner and work with you, increasingly in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been leaning harder and harder into what creativity really looks like, and specifically what the intersection of creativity and STEM looks like. How do we play in that space? That we use creativity in a way that's productive, that it changes how students engage in the learning process, but not so much that we don't want to relegate it, I don't want to say just to art projects, but we don't want it to just be a cutesy thing that we do and the creative kids go over there while the academically savvy kids come over here. We increasingly trying to figure out how do we blend the two. Well, to do that, we started doing some homework. Duncan Wardle, who's the former head of innovation for Disney Corporation, he has a fascinating career path. He started in HR, worked in HR for 25 years, and they appointed him as head of innovation. That's a fascinating trajectory if you think about Disney. When he joined the innovation group and started leading their work, he got to talking with his team, and he realized creativity was a thing that they do, but it was also a thing that no one could define. And so they had this loose definition of creativity, and he said, let's come up with a definition of creativity. The definition they landed on, and I won't say it's right, but Disney's done a pretty good job capitalizing on creativity in the last few decades. Their definition of creativity said this. It said, it's the habit of continually trying different things in order to make people's lives better. The habit of continually trying different things in order to make people's lives better. What word, you just yell it out. What word jumps out at you in that? Here, continually. Trying, who said it? Habit. Have you ever described creativity as a habit? I had never heard it described that way. It's fascinating, and if they're right, if creativity is a habit, it's really empowering because it's something that can be cultivated and developed. Right? It's a thing that we can acquire. So this is the participatory part you may not love, but just bear with me. I'm going to ask you to all stand up. I'm going to prove to you that you have some habits that you could change. You may not even know it's a habit that you have currently. So if you'll stand up out of your seat. I'm going to have a hard time holding the mic here. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Really simple. Just cross your arms. Great. Now look down at your arms and take a note of which hand is on top, which arm is on top, how are they placed. Got it? Now shake your arms up in the air. Shake them crazy. Great. Recross them and switch which hand is on top. Go. Right? That's almost like fingernails on a chalkboard bad, right? You can have a seat. I won't call names, but some of you are like, I can't do that. That's not a thing I can do. My body doesn't move that way. Here's what psychologists tell us. Psychologists tell us that it's a habit. How we cross our arms is a habit that lives in our subconscious, and that with about 14 days, doing it 30 to 40 times a day, if we just got up for 14 days and crossed our arms in the wrong direction or the other direction for about 2 weeks, suddenly we break that habit and we cultivate a new habit where we change our arms and we change how we cross our arms. It's totally arbitrary. But as we think about creativity in STEM, it's an interesting idea. If creativity isn't relegated to the kid who draws good. Sorry for the bad grammar. If creativity isn't just relegated to the group that's sees colors and can be expressive visually, that's certainly one way to express creativity. But increasingly, we think about creativity as a way to engage in problem solving. Can we dream up creative solutions to real problems? Can we make those solutions actually work? Can we make those solutions and not just talk about them? So in that lane, we've been doing some work. I've set down the clicker. We've been doing some work in that same lane. And those of you that are familiar with the work going on in Hamilton County Schools, about 5 years ago, Volkswagen made a significant investment to start building out these fab labs, or they called them VWE labs. It turns out when you give a donation with 2 or 3 commas in it, you get to tell people what to call things. They did that. They told us to call them VWE labs. And as the network has grown, it's turned into the largest network in the world of fab labs. There's now 35 fab labs in schools as early as kindergarten and moving into 12th grade. What we're really excited about, and some of the stuff we want to share with you today, are some resources that are going to come to be available for you, regardless of what district you're in. We're actively working to try to be able to scale these labs across the state. So whether you're in Hamilton County Schools, Bradley, Sequatchie, wherever you're located in Southeast Tennessee, we'll be reaching out and connecting with your central office in the next year or so as we try to work to find additional resources to continue scaling this work. It's been something that's been transformative in many of our schools. And one of the things we're excited about, and certainly a theme we've seen here today at the summit, is in the computer science space. So there's a handful of folks in the room, Jessica Holloway, Michelle Bettis, who've been helping us create this pathway for computing. And what we've started to recognize is that traditionally, we've introduced students to computer science strictly through coding and only coding digital assets. Here's what I mean by that vocabulary. We typically introduce students to coding in platforms like code.org, like Scratch, like MakeCode, where they can code a little character that does a thing. And that's great as an introduction, but many students don't care. Like it doesn't resonate with them that, like, I made a cat dance. It's interesting once, it's a novelty act. How do I keep them hooked and keep them moving? What we've started seeing is this idea of trying to build out, and we're very early in this work, but we're excited to work with the State Department of Ed on this. We're trying to build out a continuum that has lots of on-ramps with lots of different touch points. Those touch points vary from activities that produce exposure, just getting students the opportunity to go, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. I actually enjoy this, all the way to doing deep dives like in related arts classes or specific extracurricular activities where we can dig in pretty deep on the coding. Once we move through and aligning those to state standards in digital literacy, computer science, and computational thinking. As we move along the continuum, nationally, over the last 15 or so years, there's been a lot of funding and research poured into what the end of this pipeline looks like. There's been literally hundreds of millions of dollars poured into developing high school curriculum, many of it equity focused on how we acquire students, how we recruit students in. But we've got a new theory of change. We're starting to see that using things like maker spaces, fab labs, physical computing in early grades, like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, we're starting to attach to students this idea that they can have an identity in computing so that we're not trying to overcome systemic barriers in high school where there are maybe social barriers, social stigmas that are set in. Right? I'm a girl, I don't have role models in this field. It's not for me, I don't see myself there. Instead of waiting to get to 16, 17 years old and introducing students to computing there, we're trying to build out a pathway that says, let's have lots of touch points along the way that are meaningful so that by high school I can make an informed decision that I've developed this identity. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm not gonna take you through the whole document, but I just wanted you to be aware that it's coming. The next piece, before I jump to the next slide, I've got one more activity for you to do, and we're going to try to do it quickly to stay on time. I'm going to have you stand up in a moment, and the TSIN, the founders, the executive group with the TSIN, has just informed us that the Nashville Predators reached out, and they're going to give us $500,000 to organize a party at the end of this week. This is totally made up. Don't get super excited. But we're going to get to host a party, and you are in charge of designing the party, okay? The catch is you got to come up with all your ideas now, like right now. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to stand up, and in a moment, you're going to turn to your partner, and if this is my partner, what's your name?
Kelly.
Everybody say hi, Kelly. Teachers are so good at that. So Kelly's going to stand up, and if she's my partner, she's going to give me an idea on how she's going to spend this $500,000 for her party.
Hawaiian themed.
Hawaiian theme. And I'm going to respond, no, that won't work because we're in Nashville and it's hockey. And hockey in Hawaii doesn't really work. What's your next idea?
I don't. Maybe Arctic snow fun.
Arctic snow fun. Well, I mean, that's nice, but it is kind of hot outside. We're sweating. I don't think that's going to work either. So, no, we can't do that because it doesn't really fit the current climate here. So here's what we're going to do. One of you is going to be pitching how you're going to spin and set up this $500,000 party. The other is going to respond first with the two words, no, because, and then fill in the blank. Okay? Go ahead. Stand up. We think better when we're standing up. Find a partner. One of you is pitching how to use the $500,000. The other is responding, no, because, go. You got 10 seconds left. Okay, time. You can have a seat. Okay. I need one person. Who was a pitcher? Who had $500,000 to spend? You were coming up with ideas. You did. Would you mind to share an idea or two? Give us your best idea.
Yes, we are going to we're going to spend a lot of money on food. We're going to have shrimp cocktail, caviar, different, like a live band, a stage, floating dancers, and she said she couldn't say no.
I mean, that sort of blows the whole illustration, man. You must not work for central office. That's what you say, yeah. Nice. Okay, so like there's this thing we do as adults. Duncan talks about the idea that like what do students do really well, what do kids do really well that adults don't do? Students are really young kids are really good at like abstract thinking. They'll love to ideate and dream, right? Wildly imaginative. And the way we've designed school over the last 50 or so years, we continue to sort of degrade into a space where we kill that creativity, right? Where we look for just right answers. And what happens is adults, we are increasingly, the more expertise we have, the more we jump into reductive thinking. Anybody have a barrier that you gave, like no because, that you were really proud of? Don't raise your hand. But so what we often see is this. We often fall into like, it's really easy to go, well, no, that's a great idea, but we can't do that because it doesn't comply with legal. We don't have time to get the field trip forms in. We don't have time to, like, the state test is in 2 weeks. We got to be ready for that, right? There's always 10 good reasons we can't do anything. And obviously, regardless of our position, there's someone above us. That means we can't do everything, right? Like, there are some things we have to comply with. I had a principal several years ago that talked to me about the idea of greenhousing big ideas. So as we talk about some resources today, I want to pitch to you a little bit on the conceptual before we get literal. The concept of greenhousing big ideas. You need space. You don't need a ton of space, but space for yourself, for your faculty, for your team at your school, to spend maybe 15% of your time in a year just dreaming up what the craziest thing you can think of is. And not a ton, but a little bit of time. And as you dig into that space, as you lean into that and start dreaming, what we can do is not meet those dreams with, no, we can't do that because, but commit that in that session, that day, with your team, with your grade level team, whoever your team is, we're going to respond yes and. We're going to just say, yes, that's a great idea, and how can we make that happen? And if we can't figure out how to operationalize it, we might greenhouse it. The idea of greenhousing is we might incubate it. I can't do it today, but it is interesting. I'd love to keep thinking more about that. And the more authority you have as a positional leader, be careful not to do that as like a way to not have to really answer them. Yeah, let's think about that later. You'll forget in 6 months, so we don't have to do it. Be careful about getting into that space, for sure. So we can do the same thing. We're not, but we could do the same activity and this time say yes and. You know what? Let's do it. Everybody stand up. The other person is pitching. Partner with the same person. The other person's pitching. Now, same deal, $500,000 party, but this time you always respond with yes and. Go. And 3, 2, 1, we're done. You can have a seat. So I'm blessed to get to work with some folks in our innovation department at the Hub that practice this regularly, that regularly say, yeah, and it's really dangerous for people like me because I'm a dreamer. I love to sit in spaces and go, what about, oh, and we could try, well, let's try. And at some point, I have to have colleagues or people on my team who I work with who can go, chill for a minute. We got to actually do the last good idea before we don't just keep dreaming of the next ideas, right? So stuff has to happen. Fortunately, we've got a nice big team. This is a resource. I'm going to give you a sneak peek of a resource that we're going to be releasing later this summer, early fall. It'll first come out for Hamilton County Schools. They helped pay for it. As we go through a little bit of testing, we're hoping by January, maybe by the end of the school year, we're able to start working with districts to bring it to districts across the state. We've been able to develop it with a pretty agile framework, so it can work basically anywhere. But for now, we've framed it around the idea of sort of school-based fab labs for some of the content. But it's very malleable, and you'll see what that looks like. So I'm going to give you just a quick glimpse at this, maybe. Hey, there it goes. So we've developed a web-based application. It's in pre-alpha right now, which apparently means it's not pretty, but it kind of works. It's a web-based app that works on mobile devices, on Chromebooks, on computers, and it provides a digital portfolio for students, instructor resources, and administrator resources for coaching teachers as they develop and facilitate rich lessons, rich experiences in maker environments. It's not Fab Lab, not isolated to Fab Labs, but that's, as I mentioned, you'll see some bits in a moment, that's kind of where we're starting. There we go. We took a pretty unique approach in this development. This is part of the state's Innovative High School Models grant that Hamilton County Schools won. That's really helped us get this off the ground. And there's about 50 eLab specialists, eLab teachers, and principals who've been contributing to this over the last 2 years as they've been building out content. The idea was this. When we get into makerspaces and Fab Labs, we tend to hyper-focus on the technical skills. We look in makerspaces oftentimes in the last 15 or so years with the maker movement, and we tend to turn them into shop class for the 21st century. My shop class experience was very much this. It was the teacher was going to be assessed on his ability to teach, it was always a he, on his ability to teach me how to use a tool. It was about craftsmanship. So he would make a birdhouse, and he'd go, you're going to use a drill press and a bandsaw, and if you can replicate my birdhouse, follow my 10 steps, I'll know you've mastered those tools, right? You have a level of craftsmanship that's up to snuff. And that's great. But computer-controlled tools have changed things. Things like 3D printers and laser cutters give us a level of precision and craftsmanship that was previously took generations to master. Now we can master it with a few simple lessons on software. So what we've done is we've taken this idea of tech skills and we've blended it with essential skills. Taking from the STEM, the Global STEM Alliance out of New York, the essential skills you could essentially boil down for simplicity to the 4 C's. So we started thinking about collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creative problem solving, and then we took those, and just like we do with content, we started breaking those down into strata. So if you think about math, we know the vertical strata in math in high school is usually Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. There's a clear plan on sort of how to get better, more proficient at math. We're starting to do the same thing with essential skills. To say, how do I get better at collaboration? What are the subdomains of collaboration? What's the analog to Algebra 1 in an essential skill? Well, building on this notion, we started creating a gamified environment. And it was really, really complicated. There will be a quiz. I recommend taking a picture and zooming and studying. I'm playing. I'm going to zoom into one section of this for you. Right now we're at about 130 skills, or each of these boxes represents a micro-credential that students can earn as they engage in projects. So the green boxes, which you can still only sort of read, are about 2-dimensional graphic design. It's one of the pillars, one of the technical skills that are common in makerspaces or Fab Labs. What you'll notice in the purple is that as you work through, I'll point at this one here, there's a EPSO, Early Post-Secondary Opportunity, in Autodesk for Autodesk Fusion 360. The idea is not to necessarily point at the EPSOs and say, let's design projects where the teacher does all the critical thinking, creates a recipe, and if the students complete the recipe 10 times, they'll get this industry certification, they'll get this credential. The idea is instead to put students in a situation where we say we ask big questions with access to expert teachers and this kind of technology. They can be prepared to create solutions that they dream up, and as they create those solutions, they're well prepared to then go on and earn these credentials. We don't want the tail wagging the dog, but if the student's done the requisite work, we certainly want to inform them that, hey, there's an EPSO out there, there's an industry certification that you're really well equipped to go earn. We also want to inform them much earlier that like these EPSOs are out there and you can be thoughtful about how you navigate this space. So we actually took this sort of big idea and started working with the software development team from Start Soul out of Cleveland, Ohio. They built interactive skill trees. I don't know how many of you are gamers. I still play a lot of video games. And there's a game called Watch Dogs. It's a third-person shooter. Run around and kill people and hack stuff. I'm not advocating that that's something we should do at school, the game or the activity. But in the game, your character, the player is responsible for leveling their character up, for developing specialized skills. So we stole the same sort of architecture for this so that we can build these out. And essentially, the architecture is skill agnostic. We can build this around any set of technical skills. What's perhaps even more exciting is, as I mentioned earlier, we've started stratifying a way to quantify essential skills. So typically, when we ask schools, how do you know your students get better at collaboration through their time at your school? Very few schools in the country can answer that question. At best, we hear things like, we do a lot of group work. Now, that wouldn't fly if we asked that same question about math. How do kids get better at math at your school? We do a lot of math. Probably not keeping your job very long. So we started building out this idea on like, what are those look fors? Well, that turned into an online portfolio project for students. So students are able to create an online portfolio. They submit evidence from projects they're working on. They could submit that evidence in just about any way possible. The team's already built a really slick interface that uses QR codes that works with mobile devices and Chromebooks. And it's married uniquely to a student identifier at the district, in the district's database. So no student identifiable information is passed back to the app. So it remains in compliance with district protocols. At the bottom, the students get to pick the skills that they want to be assessed on. When a teacher assigns a project, they have the ability to curate that list. So they could say, in this project, everyone's using the 3D printer. That's the only skills available. Or it could be a totally open project where students get to pick from any of the available skills that they want to be assessed on. So it can really start to provide as much student agency in the process as possible. Once they submit evidence, the teacher gets an interactive form that collects their evidence. The teacher is able, it automatically populates the look fors, like what are the criteria that the students have to demonstrate proficiency in for each of the skills. As the teacher, they're all binary choices. Yes, I see it. No, I don't. As the teacher gives that feedback, as you can see, like essential skill 1 is all green. The student would automatically within the system be given or granted a micro-credential, a digital badge for that. Oh, I went one too many. And then this allows, once this feedback is given, the students are able to curate their online portfolio with a public link. So they working with their teacher in younger ages and into high school, they have full control. The students can curate what projects show up. So they can send this with resumes, with college applications, and each project that they've submitted, they have full control over what's showing publicly. And it assigns the badges that they've earned with those projects. So you can see, like, when did you show proficiency in Autodesk or in 3D printing? Oh, I did it on this project right here. Right, so you can sort of really easily track that. Two really, I think, interesting parts here. One, right now, the architecture for this is built around Canvas, and it uses ClassLink as the SSO, the single sign-on authority. So that means no usernames and passwords to remember. Students will see this as an app in their ClassLink within Canvas. They've also designed the architecture on the back end to be agile to work with Google Classroom, with Blackboard, with basically any learning management system that's in use today. So we're really excited about the possibilities with that. On the instructor's toolkit side, this is actually in response originally to the last time we had an in-person TSIN summit. We asked for your feedback. Is that my timer? Close. we asked for your feedback. And you told us that with the lending library, the technology that we lend out to schools, you'd really like to have a one-pager of like, what do you do with this? And give me some project ideas. It's not a curriculum, but it's a starting point. I don't know what to do with microbits or with 3D pens. Can you give me a thing? So we started building these out. We've got about 24 of them built. We're hoping to get well over 100 in the next few months. Teachers are building these. They're designing these. They're all one page exactly. They provide differentiation strategies, extensions. They map directly to the technical skills and STEM essential skills. They also, in the project cards within the app, they map to, it provides potential mapping to state standards where there might be alignment that you could use. So this one, for example, is like a 3rd or 4th grade ELA project. Yes, around Rapunzel's tower. I was thinking, which one do we put in here? So I wanted to share that with you about Fabfolio. If you're interested, my contact information is at the end. I'd be happy to talk with you or your district about that. We're at least 6 months away from that being something we could share beyond Hamilton County. But as we're designing it, we'd love to start getting feedback and just thinking about how we make sure that it's a tool that works robustly and can be impactful across the state. We also want to share a few resources that are coming up. Here, if you're interested, the QR code links to the registration page. We're going to be offering a virtual Innovative Educator Workshop on May 31st. It'll be fully online, so you're welcome to participate from wherever. We'll be using Tinkercad circuits for that, so it's an early introduction to physical computing, electronics, and coding. The idea there is to be, well, you'll see in the registration form, we ask you for your level. If you're a beginner, that's fine. If you're a little more advanced, that's certainly fine too. We'd be happy to have you. That is provided for free thanks to our partnership with the TSAN. We also, several of you take advantage of this already, but we have our technology lending library completely funded by the TSAN. This is about $350,000 worth of technology, classroom technology. It's fully automated online now. It keeps track of what's available, when's it going to be available, how long can you check it out. We're happy to make arrangements with you to drive it out to you, to meet you somewhere. We lend stuff all over Southeast Tennessee, and we'd be more than happy to share that with you. All of it is digitized now, so you can get that from the link. The last two, the Chattanooga Fab Institute. Several of you have attended this in the past. It's back again for year 4. It's a deep dive into making. Very hands-on. We basically ban PowerPoint and spend 3 days like using tools, like doing fun stuff. It's intended for anybody from I've never seen a 3D printer to like I built my own last week. We'll grab you wherever you're at and work with you. If you're interested, it's thanks to the partnership with Volkswagen, it's free. So if you register and use code FABFRIENDS22 in the bottom left corner, it'll waive the $40 registration fee. And that includes breakfast and lunch and a reception with alcohol at the end. So after 3 days of using tools you've never seen, you'll know why we do the reception. We're very excited. We just secured Kevin Honeycutt to be our keynote speaker. Kevin is a retired art teacher from Colorado. He's an incredible facilitator. Just brings all kinds of energy and fun to the table. Okay, the last thing, and sort of your ticket out the door, if you need more information, you can contact us at pefinnovationhub.org. All of our contact information is there. My team would be happy to connect and work with you. And if you're interested, there's a Padlet link there. We'd love for you to, there's 3 questions. It's not long, but we'd love to make sure that we're tailoring what we're doing to meet your needs. You don't have to fill that out today. It's not going to expire. But we'd love for you to go in and just answer those 3 questions. We want to make sure we're providing services that are useful to you. In particular, one of those questions is about the technology in that lending library. We're able to add to that every year. We want to make sure we're adding things that like you want. So we'd love to have you provide feedback there. That's all I've got. I'm happy to chat with whomever afterwards. Thank y'all.